across the Village Media Network and wherever you get your favorite podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Welcome back to a Closer Look on this Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, with Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village Media. I'm Scott Sexsmith. We continue to get a ton of feedback on our episode surrounding violence against teachers.
Yes, this is an issue that's been kind of on the radar for the last couple of years, and there's always new reports, whether it be new FOI requests with the ministry showing the latest numbers or different anecdotal evidence from researchers or from unions. When we talked about it the other day, OECTA, which represents Catholic teachers in Ontario, had commissioned another study talking about violence in classrooms, and they described it as, quote, the new normal. We've had a lot of reaction, some emails, lots of comments on the stories. We did have a particular teacher reach out with a very well-written note. They wanted to remain anonymous. They didn't want their school board named,
of course,
which makes sense. But this teacher, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's long, but it's very well done. This teacher just talked about having personally been bit and kicked multiple times. At one point, blood was drawn when they were bitten. Punched in the face so hard that my glasses fell off and were damaged. This teacher personally witnessed a student throw a cart from the breakfast room full of food and utensils at a principal, talking about how hold and secures are like a weekly occurrence at the school. They happen all the time. And also confirming what the researchers told us about how the other students kind of live in this world of walking on eggshells because they're always concerned that if they do something, it could trigger that particular student to have one of these violent outbursts and sort of disrupt the rest of the school day. Because they did talk about how this not only has an impact on the kids that need the support who are acting out in this way, but also the kids who are trying to learn. And this impacts the learning environment, right? This particular teacher wrote, I want to be clear that I don't blame the students for being violent. The majority of them have complex special needs, and aggression is mostly due to lack of support, lack of programming, and large class sizes over 30 students. Most children with special needs have difficulty regulating their emotions, and being in a room with that many students makes it very difficult for them to avoid triggers. Your guests were accurate in stating that a lot of these situations are preventable with the proper supports in place. And this teacher is urging parents to be vocal, to talk to their school leadership, to talk to their MPPs, because this really comes down to having more supports for the students who need it. We live in a world, we've talked about this, if you have a teacher in this business, it's a different world than it was 30 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
There's so many complex needs. So we do appreciate that teacher writing to us and for all the others who've reached out. Obviously, it's a talker and it's a powerful issue, an ongoing issue that we're dealing with. And as we start to see, we just saw in the news this week that some of the union leaders in Ontario are already urging the province to start negotiating, and we're months in advance of the new negotiations. They want some of these things answered now and getting dealt with it. And again, with the provincial budget coming down, funding for schools, funding for healthcare, it's all up in the air right now. And this is just one of the many, many issues. But it's nice to hear from someone on the front lines who does this work. And it just puts into perspective how difficult it is and how challenging it is. Yes, rewarding for sure for teachers, but it's so challenging to be doing that job today.
Yeah, and we certainly appreciate the input and the feedback. And keep it coming anytime at closerlook@villagemedia.ca. Okay, to tonight's show, a new report is out from the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society with some pretty big numbers and big economic impacts.
Yeah, for wildlife and conservation.
Yeah,
it's just we think of we consider them priceless, right? We think of our provincial parks.
For sure.
We think of the protected wilderness in this country. It's part of the definition of Canada. That's why we love Canada. And
priceless, but now there's actually numbers.
There's number two. I tried to put a price tag on it. So this organization has kind of done an economic analysis of the true value, at least this value, the economic value of these protected areas. And it's fascinating how it's not only worth billions of dollars, but continually grows like a long-term investment, right? And in this era of Donald Trump, when we're trying to figure out how best to shift the Canadian economy for what's to come, this new world we live in now, where wildlife or wilderness and protected areas play a role. So it's a fascinating conversation. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Who's coming on to join us tonight?
Jason Wong is coming on. Jason is actually the lead author of the new white paper.
Yes, and just in advance, he doesn't have video on his computer, so it's just an audio conversation today.
Yeah.
So lucky enough, you'll see us.
Get to see more of us.
Yeah, but you won't see Jason.
Also priceless.
Yes, but I think it'll be an opportunity to listen harder this time because you're not going to see him. It's a great conversation.
For years, protecting nature has been framed as a cost, something we do because it's the right thing, not because it pays. But new research from the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society suggests Canada's protected natural areas generate nearly $11 billion a year in GDP, support 150,000 jobs, and return billions in tax revenue. So at a time when Ottawa is focused on growing the economy, it begs the question, is conservation actually one of the smartest economic plays on the table? Jason Wong is an economic analyst with the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society and lead author of the new white paper and joins us from Toronto tonight. Jason, welcome to Closer Look. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Jason, want to get into the findings of the research, and we will shortly, but let's start by having you tell us a bit about your organization and what you do.
Absolutely. So we at the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society are a national charity dedicated towards the protection of Canada's lands and waters. And we're deeply invested in our communities, and it shows because we've been at this for over 60 years, and we have regional chapters across 13 areas across the country. And so this is something that we've long been passionate and advocated for. And this newest report that we've come out with is just another way we're presenting the value and the benefits of protecting nature.
All right, good stuff. Thanks for that explanation, Jason. Okay, for years we've heard that conservation, kind of framed as a moral or environmental obligation. Jason, what did you find when you looked at it purely through an economic lens?
Something that we really wanted to add with this report is, as you said, I think many people have an intuitive understanding of why environmentally it's a good idea to protect nature. But this report really was to make that business case, this economic case on why investing in conservation helps put money back into all of our pockets. And so, we approach this with the idea that the nature delivers these persistent and annual benefits. And how can we share that? How can we make that concrete? And so we undertook this economic modeling to show that every year that our protected areas contribute over $10.9 billion to our GDP, as well as supporting 150,000 jobs across the country.
It's interesting, right, Jason, because it really does reframe how Canadians understand the value of nature, like you touched on. But really, it's not as just something to protect, but as a public asset that could actually be one of the country's long-term investments. Can you speak to that a little bit about just this idea that most Canadians would never think of the wilderness in this way?
Yeah, I think that when we get in these kinds of conversations, it's often brought up as a trade-off, right? Mm-hmm. When we put dollars towards conservation or nature, that we're somehow sacrificing something at the altar of our economic prosperity or our well-being. And what we see really is that these investments pay off and they grow, they compound. We start using economic terms, they compound our investments, and we get this return on investment year after year. And our figures are to uncover different layers of that. So from an economic perspective, this $10.9 billion in GDP, it recurs and it happens every year, and it disproportionately benefits these rural areas across the country where it can make this really transformational impact on these local communities. Mm-hmm. And then once we dig even past beyond just the dollars and jobs figures, we see the environmental value in terms of the ecosystem services, in terms of the carbon stored, in terms of the mental health benefits that these natural areas bring toward all of communities. And that's borne out across nationally, provincially, as well as the three case studies, the local case studies that we included in the report.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. The report has this number that really stuck out to me. Every dollar spent by governments and nonprofits in protected and conserved areas generates $3.62 in visitor spending. That's quite a big difference. Did that surprise you when you got that number?
I think it's been a gratifying result to see that we've had this sense, right, that these areas are contributing in some way, but that this is really putting a concrete figure on that. This was us compiling all of the expenditures, all the dollars that are being spent by governments, by nonprofits, and by visitors. And we frame it this way because these on Crown lands, a lot of these areas wouldn't exist if it weren't for the government taking the leadership role in this. Mm-hmm. And so it's really making the case that when our governments step up to the plate, when they invest and lead the way, that we generate, the $3.62 for every $1 they put in.
Jason, skeptics might say that the tourism jobs are seasonal and low paying. How durable and significant are those 150,000 jobs that your report identifies?
That's a great question. So our job figures includes all different kinds of jobs, not only in protected areas, but also all of the industries that are reliant or dependent on protected areas. I think you and I have an intuitive understanding that when we buy a backpack for our kids to go to school next September, that a portion of that money goes towards the textiles, towards the manufacturers that create that backpack, right? So our dollar has a ripple effect on the entire Canadian economy. And it's this exact same case there, that the jobs that are supported by the protected areas are not just those in tourism, in recreation, in those areas, but all of those other industries like the steel, manufacturing, construction, all those materials that go into building the certain things, protected areas, all of those are included in our jobs figures. And I really want to specifically highlight that one of those jobs figures includes Indigenous Guardians programs, which is this really incredible initiative that trains members of the Indigenous communities to act as stewards and monitor the lands in protected areas. And so this is a step towards reconciliation. It's providing meaningful jobs and is fulfilling this incredibly important monitoring role that we need to better understand how our nature is evolving. And the last piece I would say in terms of the stability, are these seasonal jobs or are they, can we count on them, is that when we invest in conserved and protected areas, we're building this green infrastructure. These protected areas don't pack their bags up and leave in the winter, right? Mm-hmm. These parks, they stay there year after year, and they deliver these environmental benefits and these health benefits I talked about earlier. Compared to, say, if you look at a mine might last for 10 years, whereas a protected area will last for generations.
Mm-hmm. Those are all great points. Thank you, Jason. I guess the key question is this report comes at a time when we're all thinking of President Trump, and we are rethinking and retooling and shifting the Canadian economy because of the different things that have happened since Trump took office. How does this report fit into that, and what should the government be thinking of in terms of the value of conservation areas in this era of Trump?
I think at a national level, we are really focused on these infrastructure building projects and on these ways to really assert and defend our economic sovereignty, right? That there's been a lot of headwinds from tariffs and kind of unpredictable situations from the geopolitics. And what we're suggesting here is that by investing in protected areas, this is a way for us to reinvigorate, to strengthen and grow economic returns in something that stays in Canada. And again, these particular areas aren't going to leave our country, and it has these spillover effects on all these other industries within the domestic economy, as well as addressing once again mental health crises, as well as the impacts of climate change. Like we have a wildfire season now where we didn't have that before, and again. Investing in protected areas helps address all three of these different aspects in a really effective and sometimes really low cost-effective way.
Mm-hmm. And we're at a time, if I understand correctly, that this funding is about to end. A lot of the federal funding for these protected areas, March 31st, I believe. Where are we at on that? And are you hearing anything from the government in terms of whether this funding will continue?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a bit of context. Back in 2021, the federal government really committed a substantial pot of money towards conservation, and that funding is largely set to expire by March 31st of this year. Mm-hmm. And so right now the ball is really in the federal government's court to stand by their commitments. They've reaffirmed in previous speeches from the throne their commitment to protecting nature, and it's just really to see the follow through on whether the dollars and how the dollars will flow. And so our role here at CPAWS is to put up this kind of information like we have in our report to make sure that our decision makers are informed on the true value of nature when we're deciding, what to fund and how much to fund.
Mm-hmm. Are you and your organization confident that this funding will continue after March 31st?
We're continuing to have these conversations with the government. We've outlined a series of recommendations within the report, as well as through other channels, on what's needed to maximize the benefits of our protected areas. And this is a collaboration. This is not the first inning that we've been through with the government. We've been here for 60 years, and we can continue to have this collaboration with the government.
For sure. Obviously, this is a fascinating report because it's from an economic perspective, and it was peer-reviewed by fellow economists. What has the reaction been to others in your field who've read this?
I think that it's received a lot of attention because it's specifically making that's a business case, right? That we are putting these kind of really traditional figures on in terms of jobs and GDP and tax revenues. And that's really for us to begin that conversation, to draw in folks who might be interested in the conservation but not be sure of the value, and say, and demonstrate in a really clear way, this is how many jobs that are supported in Grossmore National Park in Newfoundland, in your backyard. But then to also begin to educate and share how we can look at the value of nature differently, whether that's natural capital accounting, whether that's ecosystem services, health benefits, and start building that into our planning processes to incorporate all of that. And to show that once we do that, regardless of what sector or what part of the economy you work in, we'll all be better off for it.
Interesting. Yeah,
yeah, it is. Jason, any other points on the research that you'd like to bring up before we let you go tonight?
For us, we just really want to reiterate that the nature is delivering these kinds of consistent and recurring benefits year after year after year, and that it's time for us to start counting that. What we're doing right now is we're playing with one arm tied behind our back, and when we start to really incorporate the value of nature across all of our activities and development, we'll be better off as a country and as a globe.
All right. From the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, joining us this evening from Toronto, there's Jason Wong. Jason, thanks for your time tonight. We appreciate it. I'm still blown away by that number of $11 billion a year in gross domestic product. It's crazy.
It is fascinating. It's just what we hope to do on our show a lot, which is open eyes. You don't really think of parks and conservation areas in that way, right? We're talking like provincial parks, massive wildlife reserves, and the economic benefit of these. We think of the beauty and the environmental benefits, not the economic benefit. It will be interesting to see, though, because the federal side and the provincial, this is not provincial funding. Well, some of it would be, but there's just so much pressure on the purses right now, right? You just think of like the federal budget that's going to come, the provincial budget that's coming. There's so much tug of war going on over who gets what funding.
Everybody's got their hands up.
Yeah, and they're all making a case for why you need to fund this is so important. And I think they've made a very compelling case. But in the end, we'll see what happens with the purse remains open.
All right, good stuff. That is it for us this evening. Derek Turner with the night off, not feeling so well. So the one and only Zach Trunzo producing this evening's program. Closer look at villagemedia.ca. That is our email. Reach out anytime. We'd love to hear from you. For Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Thanks for your time. We'll do it again tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.